Naked Economics, Undressing the Dismal Science by Charles Whelan, Burton G. Malkiel. The dismal science is a label applied to economics by the Scottish philosopher Thomas Carlyle over a century ago. This label is now well known because economics can seem dry, filled with obscure terminology, hard to understand charts, and endless mathematical equations. These elements make it difficult to see the connection between economics and everyday life or the exciting aspects of economic analysis. The book Naked Economics aims to strip away this layer of dullness and reveal the fundamental ways of economic thinking. The author of this book, Charles Whelan, is a professor of economics at Dartmouth College in the United States. He has worked as a reporter in the American Midwest for The Economist magazine. He has published numerous articles in the Chicago Tribune, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal. You may have heard of his previous book, Naked Statistics. The book we are discussing today, Naked Economics, is one of Whelan's significant works, and it has been a bestseller in the United States for many years. The book is an economics primer containing no complicated charts, terminology, or equations. Instead, it uses everyday language, relatable examples, and enlightening economic thinking behind them. The book's first half focuses on microeconomics, primarily discussing the accumulation of individual wealth and the functioning of market economies. It explores issues related to wealth disparities among individuals. The second half concentrates on macroeconomics, discussing wealth disparities among nations. Understanding these topics not only helps us think about how to improve our lives, but also clarifies how to use economic thinking to explore the patterns of the world. The following audio is divided into two parts. The first part discusses understanding wealth disparities among individuals from a microeconomic perspective and the critical factors for individual wealth accumulation. The second part discusses how to view wealth disparities among nations from a macroeconomic perspective, exploring why rich nations are wealthy and how poor nations can transition to prosperity. Let's dive into the first part, discussing how to understand wealth disparities among individuals from a microeconomic perspective and the critical factors for individual wealth accumulation. Microeconomics primarily studies the economic behavior of individuals in the marketplace and the mechanisms that drive the functioning of the market. The key to understanding individual economic behavior can be summed up in 3 words: maximizing individual utility. Which means that each individual tries to improve their situation as much as possible, aiming to maximize their happiness or utility. This concept is also referred to as utility maximization in economics. Similarly, businesses strive to maximize their profits as much as possible. Now, let's talk about the key to understanding how markets operate, which can also be summed up in 4 words: the problem of scarcity. Economists believe that resources are limited, but human desires are unlimited. Therefore, we need markets to allocate resources. So, how do markets allocate resources? The most crucial tool is price.
In Western economics, the scarcer a resource is, the higher the price the market sets for it. This pricing does not necessarily correlate with the intrinsic value of the resource itself. For instance, highly scarce diamonds can cost thousands of dollars per carat, while low water is almost free. However, from a value perspective, water is far more valuable to humanity than diamonds. After all, if there were no diamonds on Earth, we might find it inconvenient, but if all water sources were to run dry, we would die. Value expresses how much humans objectively need a resource, while market prices reflect how much we subjectively desire that resource. Ultimately, those who can obtain resources can afford the market price. For example, in a market-based healthcare system, some people cannot afford life-saving heart surgeries because they can't pay the price. In contrast, others can afford the best doctors for cosmetic surgeries like breast enhancements or facelifts.
So far, we've introduced 2 crucial concepts in microeconomics: utility maximization and the problem of scarcity. These seemingly simple concepts help us understand many truths about the world's workings. Next, we'll use these concepts to explore a perennial economic issue that receives much attention: wealth inequality. Even in the United States, which claims to be the world's wealthiest country, there are still many people living in extreme poverty. While top billionaires like Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and Elon Musk enjoy luxury cars, mansions, and private jets, others are forced to search for food in garbage bins and spend nights in station restrooms. When we look at such situations from the perspective of individual circumstances, it's easy to focus on factors like one's upbringing and luck, which are beyond their control. However, economists argue that to address the issue of wealth disparity more broadly, we need to start with the concept of human capital. Human capital is the sum of skills hidden within individuals, including education, intelligence, charisma, creativity, or the ability to run fast. In simpler terms, if someone took away everything you had, like your job, money, or family, and left you homeless, human capital would be all you have left.
In such a situation, even highly wealthy individuals, such as the King of Brunei, might not fare well because their wealth is tied to the natural resources of their land, like abundant oil, rather than their skills and abilities. But what if Bill Gates were in a similar situation? He would likely still do reasonably well because his wealth was not solely dependent on it, even if Microsoft went bankrupt. Other companies would hire him as a consultant, board member, or CEO. This brings us to the importance of scarce human capital. It means that individuals with unique skills or expertise can command high rewards. The price of human capital, just like any other resource, is determined by its scarcity. So, when discussing income disparities among individuals, we need to consider the scarcity of their human capital. When this book was written, approximately 150 million people in the United States could work in fast food jobs, a skill that is not scarce. As a result, fast food establishments paid their employees wages just enough to maintain a basic standard of living. In times of economic downturn, this might be around $5.50 per hour, while it could increase to $9 per hour during labor shortages. But it would never reach hundreds of dollars per hour that some outstanding programmers, lawyers, doctors, and other professionals could command.
In summary, applying economic thinking to the labor market is no different from any other market. The scarcer the resource you possess, the greater the return you can expect to receive. However, it's important to note that there's a time gap between investing in and realizing returns on human capital. The scarcity of human capital can change over time, depending on market demand, making it crucial to make strategic decisions on where to invest your human capital. But what about other avenues to acquire wealth more quickly and legally? Many might think of shifting to the capital market, as securities prices change much faster than labor prices. However, the reality is that only a few individuals manage to make significant gains from short-term trading. Why? From an economic perspective, it's pretty simple. The capital market is also a market. Every participant holds the same resource, money. If everyone is looking to maximize their returns from the money they have, the outcome is that everyone will earn an average return. It's similar to how people look for the shortest checkout line at a supermarket. When everyone seeks the shortest line, each line is about the same length. Occasionally, you might spot a line that appears significantly more straightforward. Still, when you join it, you may find someone with a cart full of groceries slowly checking out, making it clear that such windfalls usually don't just fall into your lap. In the context of financial investments, it's the same principle. The author of this book points out that when someone promises exceptionally high returns, there are typically three underlying truths. 1. The investment carries highly high risks. 2. The person genuinely found an opportunity that other investment experts have yet to discover and is willing to share with you. 3. The person is lying. According to the author, in many cases, the truth falls into the third category. Therefore, from an economist's perspective, most people in the capital markets can only expect average returns. Hence, a rational path to wealth through investment is buying into index funds that track the overall market and hold them long-term. This strategy yields average market returns not only among individual stocks but also across different years. As the author states in the book, what the Dow Jones Industrial Average will close at tomorrow, I don't know. What it will do next year, I don't know. In 5 years, it could be higher, but not certain. In 25 years, it's almost certain to be significantly higher than it is today. It exemplifies that, like wealth growth in the labor market, success in the capital market requires a long-term approach. Now, let's shift our focus to understanding wealth disparities between nations from the macroeconomics perspective. To address this question, we first need to know how to measure a country's economic status. One commonly used metric is gross domestic product, GDP, the total value of goods and services produced within an economy during a specified period, summed at market prices.
People often look at the annual GDP rankings of different nations to gauge their economic power. For example, the United States was the largest economy in 2020, with a GDP of approximately $21 trillion. Followed by China at nearly $15 trillion and Japan at around $5 trillion. However, when discussing whether a country is rich or poor, we usually refer to per capita GDP. Per capita GDP represents a nation's average standard of living and provides insight into the moderate prosperity of its population. There are various criticisms of using GDP as a measure of economic development. Critics argue that GDP doesn't account for economic activities that don't involve monetary transactions, such as household chores. Furthermore, it doesn't consider externalities like environmental degradation, and it doesn't reflect the distribution of income. For example, the average might not capture disparities if one wealthy individual's income is averaged with those of many poor individuals. Economists and researchers have introduced alternative indices to address these concerns, such as the Social Health Index, the Gross National Happiness Index, and the Human Development Index, HDI. The Human Development Index, proposed by the United Nations, includes indicators like per capita income, life expectancy, literacy rate, and school enrollment. Each of these indices provides a different perspective on economic development and societal well-being. And none is entirely free from subjective components. The choice of an indicator depends on how one defines economic development and what aspects of well-being are considered most important. The reason that GDP remains widely used and emphasized is because it reflects the material basis that underpins an economy. While GDP growth doesn't necessarily correlate with increased happiness or well-being, a shrinking GDP clearly indicates worsening economic conditions.
Negative GDP growth implies unemployment, business closures, and the underutilization of production capital, all of which can lead to an economic recession with numerous adverse social consequences. Overall, the use of various indicators for economic development is influenced by how one defines progress and well-being. These indices, including GDP, have limitations, and no single correct metric for evaluating economic development exists. Each index provides a different piece of the puzzle, and a comprehensive assessment of a nation's financial status may require considering several of these measures. Now, let's discuss the exploration of the wealth disparities between countries by economists, as pointed out by the author. The author begins by stating a fundamental truth: economists have yet to discover a secret formula that can quickly transform economically poor nations into wealthy ones. While we've seen success stories of countries transitioning from poverty to prosperity, such as the Asian tigers, no proven one-size-fits-all growth recipe can be replicated from one country to another. Economists have identified several factors contributing to a country's prosperity. These factors include effective government institutions, secure property rights, open trade policies, and robust public education systems. However, the challenge lies in that achieving these conditions is far more complicated than recognizing their importance.
For example, building effective government institutions is more accessible when the population has access to quality education. Still, establishing a robust public education system requires support from effective government institutions, creating a chicken and egg problem. Over the past half-century, economists have continuously attempted to assist poorer nations in pursuing prosperity. However, while initially receiving support, many of the strategic recommendations provided by economists have ultimately failed. An old joke humorously summarizes the essence of these failed strategies. A farmer noticed that his chickens were dying. So he sought help from a priest. The priest advised the farmer to pray for the chickens, but the deaths continued. Then, the priest suggested playing music in the chicken coop, but it didn't help either. Finally, the priest recommended painting the chicken coop in bright colors, after which all the chickens died. The punchline is, I have more great ideas.
Regarding how to help poorer nations become wealthier, the author suggests that direct assistance from more affluent nations may be more effective than the various recommendations put forth by economists. Richer countries have more financial resources, strong research universities, and national laboratories. They can provide valuable aid regarding industry investments, technology development, and addressing developmental issues like diseases. The author argues that positive changes can occur when powerful political will exists in wealthier nations to help less fortunate ones. This international assistance isn't just a matter of humanitarianism, it's also about recognizing that economic declines in other nations can rapidly spill over borders in a globalized market. Furthermore, disturbances in other countries might serve as precursors to chaos in the rest of the world. Therefore, helping struggling nations isn't just an act of generosity, it's a self-interested approach that contributes to global stability. In summary, the author's perspective in the book Naked Economics emphasizes that there isn't a guaranteed formula for transforming poor nations into rich ones, and the complexity of development is not easily overcome. While economists have identified factors contributing to prosperity, implementing these factors in practice poses significant challenges. Direct assistance from wealthier nations can be a more practical approach, not only for humanitarian reasons but also for global stability.